All right, welcome back. We are Game 3004, that's Mobile Game Dev 2, in the winter 2022 semester at George Brown, and it's week 10, part 2 of our broadcasts and time together. Let's continue from where we were last day. So again, just a reminder, the project part 6, the beta release is due week 12. Again, this all has to do, the timing for this one is going to do with what happens with our any potential labor disruption. I'm going to say that like that coming up. If there's an issue, then that would modify, some of that. But for the most part, I think we're going to be okay. Hopefully, how about this? I'm hoping we're going to be okay. I'm cautiously optimistic, just like the people at in the union right now. And I'm just going to make sure that we're good to go with everything. I think so. And yes, excellent. All right, so and we're sitting at week 10, and we were talking about VFX Graph, particle effects, and 3D explosions. That kind of stuff is the kind of topic of the day. Last week we talked about, like I said, how to convert approach to mobile. We talked about that on Tuesday, and this week stuff that is due. Project components due. Our 8th weekly report is due Friday. Beta release week 12. Lab 6 is due Saturday. Okay, and I'm going to post the lab report very shortly. 9th weekly report is due next week. Okay, so this is kind of a little bit out of order. I probably would be putting this one down here and that one up there, but it's okay. So what is Lab 6? What are we doing? We've done this piece already. We used platform detection to remove on-screen controls. We did this first piece on Tuesday. We converted our project to URP. That was a big piece. Now we're down here in this place right here where we're going to install our VFX graph from the Unity registry. Let's do that next. So I'm just going to use, on the desktop, under GBC, Game 3004, we have our section 401. There it is. And here's Lab 6. This is the exact Lab 6 from Tuesday. So it's not the same as Lab 5, the Lab 5 starter we did last week. It'll be slightly different. So the one I did on Tuesday, you can still continue with your lab based on your Lab 5 from last week, but I'm going to be doing this one. And let's get rid of this. We don't need that one. And I'm just going to launch this one through Unity Hub. So I'm going to open it up. And I'm just going to go back. I just made a copy of the one from Tuesday. And we should be okay. And this way we're on the same page as we were on Tuesday. And then what we want to do is we want to put this up on GitHub as well. Like I said, GitHub, we had a minor disruption today where you couldn't push to GitHub if you wanted to. It's impossible. While we're waiting, I'm going to also talk about the requirements for your beta release, just really quickly. So in the courses under George Brown, let's look at that beta release details that I'll kind of talk about here. I talked about it this morning, but I didn't really go into detail. So your beta release, which is project part 6, okay, as an example, and I've already released this, it's available to you on Blackboard. Again, due Sunday, April 3rd, 2022. Basically, all of your graphics and sound assets for your game are 100% due by week 12. So everything that you want to include in your game is there. Really, what we're going to be doing after the beta release is doing a testing and improvements round. That's happening after the beta. And then we're going to have a testing week 13, after the beta. So week 12 is the beta release, week 13 is the testing week, and then week 14, equivalent will be our prep for our the stuff that we're doing for your presentations, your final presentations. So week 14 will probably be a week where you submit your final release. All right, a couple things are part 1 and 2 your common requirements and your game type requirements are all due by your beta. So basically, it doesn't have to be perfect, but most of them, everything should be mostly functional by this point. And all we're looking for is getting some tweaks done after this, so that way your game is as good as it can be. Okay. So things that you want to note in your 5th draft of your GED is your version history again, mechanics, dynamics that have changed, and you're going to create a testing section for your GED, and you must include relevant information and screenshots around memory usage and CPU performance. And these tests are to be performed in the editor only. So this is kind of your tests and tweaks before our testing week. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. So a new section in your GED that you're going to create for the test. So what do your memory uses look like? What does your performance look like from a CPU perspective? Can we improve these things? And what about textures and all this other stuff? I'll talk about this as we approach week 12. Okay. The release video is going to be there as normal. Your version control is going to be there. You're going to deploy your device to a device emulator or mobile device. It's up to you. And project management stuff is going to be updated, and all your system requirements are there. All right. Any questions around your beta release? You guys should be working on that right now as the main thing that you're working on. Okay. Maybe no questions. Let's kill this. Okay. So back to Unity. So Unity, here we are in Unity, and we've converted our project to URP. Remember, we ran our project. We also removed some of the controls. So when we're in, kind of Windows mode, we're able to run around and no problem. We can do that and so on, right? And we have all this kind of functionality. Okay, if I want to bring up my map, I can bring up my map. And now in testing, I gotta kind of I've got to report a couple things in testing that were kind of weird. I actually tested this on a mobile device, and I found that there's a couple things that were weird, completely weird. Let's go into 1024 by 760. Actually, let's look at 1430 by 3040 the other way. So here's what was weird. When I brought up my mini map, I thought it was pretty small. And I also felt that my health bar was pretty small as well. I think those two issues, those two were the smallest, the things that I didn't like the most. So just an FYI and feedback from the project that we had. So if I bring back our mini map, just as an example, it's looking like it's okay, but actually this is really small, right? Really, really small. We've got it pegged at about 1.5. My thoughts are, let's make it so that it's 2. And readjust our controls. So let's bring back our simulator for a second. And I'm going to adjust these controls so that when it comes in, it's going to be sitting above the map and the jump button, but I'm going to move the map and jump buttons down slightly. So on-screen controls, I'm going to go to the on-screen buttons, and let's move them down. So I'm going to bring my scene in my simulator underneath my scene. So something like this again. There it is. And I want to bring everything down slightly. So these things. I also want to look at this in the iPhone, Apple iPhone XR, just to give us a sense of what's going to happen here and here and here. Because if it works here, and see how this crunches in a little bit. So these buttons are probably too close to this one. That's what my thoughts are. So get those on-screen buttons and move them down first. So let's do that. Again, not too much, because otherwise it won't allow things. My position on the x-axis is not that important. Minus 245 right now, or 248, let's say. Minus 248. Let's undo that change. There we go. But the position on for this thing here, that my mini map has to come down. So I recommend something like we bring it into view like this. Okay. So again, I made it twice as big instead of 1.5 times. And then I want to make it so that it's aligned with this. So again, if I look at my buttons, it's minus 248 because it is relative to the bottom right corner of my screen, but it's relative to the entire side, right? So I'm just going to bring this one just over just a touch. I know it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. Okay, so it's kind of looking like it's in line. Let's make it minus 465. Okay, there we go. Save. And once I've saved everything, the other thing that I found was that the health bar was too small. So health bar was, when I was actually looking at it on screen, like on the actual control, it was too small. Even though it's twice as big as what we originally had it, I'm telling you, even 3 times as big is probably going to be right. Something like that, this big. And you may not believe it, but I'm telling you, it's like it just wasn't big enough. It wasn't viewable. So something like this big is probably right. Let's just put it at the right X and Y coordinates. So minus 135 from a Y position, and something like 650 on the X might be okay. Okay. Saving and loading can probably come up now at this point, or I can bring this down a little bit lower. Maybe I'll bring this a little bit lower. No, I think where it is right now is probably good. Let's bring our saving and loading buttons up. So again, on-screen controls, I'm going to go to my saving and loading buttons right now, and let's just bring those up to something like this, a little bit higher up, and maybe a little bit over, so that they're not up, kind of, they're unobtrusive. They're there for testing more than anything else, guys. They're not there to be perfect or whatever. And realistically, you'd want to have these, as an example, you want to have these like kind of pop in when you need them, right, through some other control. So let's save that configuration, and let's get back to, from an iPhone XR perspective, let's go back into the game, and let's run this over here again. So that's what I would say we would start off with. And I find that that is more realistic. So let's just save that mini map border. So minor changes, minor adjustments. Let's put this up on GitHub now. So file, save project. Let's get out of this, right? And I'm just going to put this up as added, project files or updated project files for Lab 6 or something like that is what I'm going to say. Okay. So again, I'm going to do that with GitHub Desktop. I always forget what I did. It's a terrible thing. Life is terrible like this. Here it is, 401. And we're going to say added project files for Lab 6 because I was using the other project from the other group. So commit to main. And then if everything went well, we should be able to push it and it should be good. All right, so now that we have put everything up, let's restart Unity again. Let's get back in there. And let's make some changes. Let's add that VFX stuff now. So again, why did I make the changes to the user interface? I made the changes because it wasn't working right on the device. It really wasn't. I was looking at it and I'm like, yeah, this is just position wrong. This is position wrong. This is too small. The mini map was too small. It was unviewable pretty much. It was so small. And you'll see the differences. When you're putting it up on LD player, it looks really big. But when you're actually in a real device, there's a difference between being on the real device and being on a simulator. All right, let's go into the next part, which is I want to add in the package manager, I want to select and add in Vfx Graph. Okay, I want to do that. So let's go all the way down to the bottom. This is the first piece. So where it says Visual Effect Graph, I'm looking inside of the packages Unity registry. This is where I'm looking. And I'm clicking on Visual Effect Graph, and I'm clicking Install. Let's do that now. So this will add typically Visual Effect Graph and Shader Graph if it hasn't been added already. However, if Shader Graph is not added, make sure you add it, guys. For me, it's been added in already. And once this is done, once we've added in VFX Graph. Okay, here it is. I'm going to wait for this to be done. Awesome. There's a couple of samples I want you to download. So under Visual Effects Graph, there are two samples. I'm going to grab additions. And this is pretty cool because it gives us some examples we're going to play with, as well as output event helpers. I'm going to grab that one too. And I also want to go into, when this is done, I want to go back into Shader Graph and grab a couple of examples from there too. So in Shader Graph now, I've already got Shader Graph installed. I want to click on Import from a procedural pattern perspective as well. All right, great. So we've got all that stuff done. And what we want to do now is check to see if some of these samples work. I don't want to play with the main scene. Instead, what I want to do is make a brand new scene here. So let's do that together. I want to make a brand new scene called Experiments. So new scene right here. We'll call this Experiments. And this is where we're going to be doing our experiments for the rest of the semester in here. And then we'll bring the results of our experiments into this scene. So let's go to Experiments. Here it is. I don't want to be in 2D mode. I want to be in 3D mode. And I want to add in a 3D object plane where we want to call this ground. Let's, kind of reset the plane. There it is. And let's reset ourselves by dropping into the plane. There we are. So the plane is there. I want to change the material. So let's go to Materials. We have a gravel cobble ground material, and I want you to kind of copy and paste that. So Control D to make a duplicate of the gravel cobble ground material. Okay. That's weird that it's doing that, but that's fine. And the gravel cobble ground material, I want you to call this the ground start material for now. I have a method to my madness, bear with me. And the ground start material is what I want to use to pop into this, the ground itself. Okay. But I want to change the UV scale from 1:1 to 4:4 to make it look very similar to what we would have seen if we took this tile and used it as a landing tile for our scene. And to show this, let's take the ground material for a second, and we'll call this the, instead of calling it ground, let's make it ground. So if we're going to test with a player, let's make it layering it on the ground. And we'll call this the start tile. I'll put this inside of another empty object, just to be the same as everything else we're doing. So I'm going to go into Create Empty Parent, and I'm going to call this empty parent the start tile. There we are. And that start tile, which is it's on the ground layer right now, I want to take that start tile and drag and drop it into prefabs. So start tile and prefabs, there we are. And what if I was to take this start tile, save the scene, and go back into the scene? I'm just going to show you this for a second. If I go back into main, and I take that start tile from prefabs, and I drag it in here, then I want to make it the same size as the other tiles, right? What can I do to make this tile the same size as those tiles, right? So again, I could snap the tile to grid. There it is. And notice that this tile is like it's quite large compared to my default tile, right? So one way of doing it is changing the I want to kind of rejig how big this is, the ground itself. Now notice I'm clicking on the start tile. The start tile is 1:1:1, right? That's what the start tile should be. Start tile should be 111, but the ground tile inside of it, right? As an example, it's going to be whatever the size of this is, roughly. So if I look at this, you can see that that is about right for the ground tile. The ground tile is about 1.6, I would say. And this one is also 1.6. So kind of something like on the XZ plane, we should be 1.6 by 1.6. And why? Because this way the ground tile or the start tile, if we're ever going to use this tile for procedural generation, right, then what I can do is I can bring this tile and it can layer nicely on top of the other one. Let's take a look and see if that's true. So if I go to tile 1, you can see that true enough, it's the same size. So start tile, right? And let's update that prefab. So I'm going to say overrides, apply all, right? And let's get rid of it. We don't need the start tile anymore. The start tile was just for me to size it, right? Delete. And let's go back into our scenes and into experiments. And we'll go with the start tile. And what I want is for me to revert right back to what this is. Well, it's already done it. It's already at 1.6. The only thing that's different is that the position should be at 0, 0. There it is. So it's position 0, 0. And this is where I'm going to use, so it's roughly the same size as one of my tiles that we've made before. Now, I would say almost exactly the same size. All right. What I want to do is I want to use some of the shader graph examples that we already have in here and drag it into the scene. So again, I'm going to go into samples, shader graph. Let's move all these samples actually into external assets because they're not ours. It's going to take a second for things to recompile. Give it a second. And then inside of external assets, samples, then inside my shader graph, there are, so shader graph gives you a bunch of patterns. And one thing is, what I'm going to ask you to do today is take a look at making your own stuff. Let's just quickly take a look at shader graph before we start talking about visual effect graph. So shader graph, these are all procedurally generated. Let's look at brick. So if I double click on this, it'll open up the shader graph. And shader graph, what it is it allows you to make your own custom shader, right? And what you can do is you can look at, adding in different nodes, and each node will kind of connect to and add to some kind of graph. Usually it's a rectangle, and this is the subgraph outputs for what we're looking at, which is a brick texture that's procedural. A procedural brick is what this is. Okay, and the great thing about this is that when you create this brick, then you have access to modify these properties inside the inspector. So if I was to use this shader as and attach it to a material, I can actually use this. You can also change what you're previewing here with a custom mesh, so we can use that, and I can put it on a plane if I want, right? So I can see what that looks like, and there it is. So you can see what it would look like if it was on a plane, or you can put it on a cube to see what the bricks would look like. This is kind of the procedural texture that would look how it would look on a cube. So this is kind of neat. The great thing about shader graph, again, it uses a visual scripting language, just similar. People mentioned that it's very similar to what you saw in UE4, where you create textures. It's the same thing here, but you're making shaders, right? Visual scripting to make shaders that are procedural, which is kind of neat, right? And what Unity has done is given you several of them. So if I want to use dots, as an example, right, or herringbone kind of structure, or houndstooth kind of structure, this is kind of neat. A spiral, these are all procedural, kind of textures that you can have in here, and you can make these move, right, with a bit of a time function, right? So that kind of stuff. A whirl, okay, as well as zigzag. So lots of really cool little things that you can look at, and it gives you a perfect example of how some of the shader stuff works. All right, we don't need all this. So discard the changes, discard the changes, discard the changes. I just wanted to show you this because I'm not sure if you've ever seen or worked with Shader Graph before. And Shader Graph works nicely with Vfx Graph. A lot of the tutorials that are online use both, right? So, and one of the challenges for today is going to be for you to pick two effects from a tutorial that you can find, and I'll give you some examples of where you can do this. Let's get also, just close off the animation and animator tabs for today. I don't need them. All right, cool. So that is Shader Graph, but and Visual Effects Graph gives you a couple of examples as well. So let's take a look at visual effect add-ins. There are some VFX, and in VFX we have a couple of things here. We have a spark, we have smoke, there's a smoke effect. We have lightning, right? Lightning doesn't seem to be working. I haven't been able to make that work, at least for this, right? Flames, right? So there's some flames, as well as a bonfire. And a bonfire combines all those things together. It combines flames, smoke, and sparks to make it look like it's going to be. If I take this bonfire as an example, and I drag and drop it into the scene, it creates a object. And inside the object, there's a visual effect component. And then inside the scene, inside the scene itself, we can see that it's pretty realistic, right, looking. Okay. And also notice that when I move my camera around, this object billboards to my camera. So it kind of changes direction. So it's like I'm always looking at my camera no matter what I'm doing. That's interesting. That's a real interesting glitch. Make sense? So that is my the smoke and fire. One thing you can do with the bonfire is you can make it bigger. If you want it to stretch this so it's bigger, you can totally do that, right? So you can make it bigger and wilder, and maybe it's a little bit better to see. In the game, it would look like this, like it's a bonfire, just like that. So pretty realistic. And this is done procedurally, again. So again, all I did for the VFX graph, if that's what you're looking at, Herman, what I did was I went into, when I downloaded and installed Visual Effects or VFX Graph, then you got a bunch of these additional samples, and the samples is where I'm getting the stuff from. I want to recreate some of the smoke patterns, right, ourselves. And the way we're going to do this, notice how it's really, really random, almost like there's a wind that kind of makes the bonfire go in different directions, which is kind of neat. I want to make it so that we make some of the smoke ourselves. Let's take a look at smoke first to take a look and see what it looks like right now. And we'll describe some of the components of the VFX graph. So VFX graph has something called a blackboard, right? Here's a blackboard. And let's just see how it's looking on your end. Yep, that's good. So yeah, VFX Graph has a blackboard, and let's start at the very top and talk about what they've done. So they have the system itself. Remember, it's a particle system. The particle system has some kind of spawn rate, which you can expose. Things that are on this side there's categories here that you can expose, right? And anything that you expose here is available in the inspector, right? You can also do it manually here if you wanted to. One thing to note is that for smoke is in world space, so it's relative to the world. It's not relative to the object. And why would this be the case? Because if you make it relative to the object, then what happens with the smoke is it's locked in, right? Where if I make it relative to the world, that means if I move the smoke around, or if the smoke is on top of a moving object, the smoke is going to trail back. It's going to kind of leave the object itself and go into world space. So smoke makes sense that it would be in world space. Okay. So there's two parts. There's the initialization step for the particle, and so far, and then this is the particle system itself. And that's what VFX Graph is it more of a complex particle system that lives on the GPU, not on the CPU. Okay, so going into the update particle, update particle has a few different pieces. There's force, linear drag, and the flipbook player. Flipbook player allows us to play a animation for the smoke, right? Because the smoke itself is being animated, it's moving, and all that kind of stuff. That's what the flipbook player allows us to do. The flipbook player has two things. I can turn on and off the flipbook player, and I can also change the flipbook frame rate to make it quicker or slower. Okay, that's what it does. The default frame rate is 25 frames, but you can kind of take a look at that, right? So if I click on this, and if I want to see if I look at the texture down here, you can see that if I hover over any one of these properties, it appears on the sidebar, and the sidebar gives us all the properties that are exposed in the inspector, right? So if I kind of hover over flipboard frame rate, then it's going to give us this part right here. And then what I can do is I can expand this, and I can see the default value, which is 25. So 25 frames per second. We'll talk about why it's that way in a second as well. Yeah, I'm just going to make this a little bit slimmer so you can see everything. So that's cool. And that is the update particle. So it has force, right, as an example, some kind of force, a global force. It has linear drag and the flipbook player itself, which is in constant mode. All right. One thing else, so again, we have the spawn, we have the initialization. Initialization includes position, velocity, lifetime, and a texture index. We want to use the texture index in order for us to use the flipbook. So flipbook itself allows us to kind of move from one frame to the next frame. That's what this part does, and it moves randomly, right? Kind of at a random speed from one frame to the other frame. That's what this random number does, from 0, as an example, to 1, right? So that's what it does. And that's the set text index. We need that part. We're going to get back that in a second. And then finally, the bottom part is output particle octagon. So again, there are different kinds of particles and shapes that you can create when you first do this. In fact, you can start with a VFX graph that's completely empty, and then you can add this back in. Notice that this one has a shader graph asset, if you want, color mapping, default, UV mode, which is a flipbook blend. Flipbook blend, I can decide on the default flipbook size. So the flipbook size here, if you look at it, is 1 by 1, because the flipbook itself is just a piece of animation for the smoke particle. That's what it does, smoke particle size. Okay. The other thing is size over lifetime, and how it gets smaller over the lifetime, right? That's what happens here. If you look at the smoke, it kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller as it moves on. It disappears. And the other thing that happens with the smoke is the camera fades. The color alpha over lifetime, it becomes one thing that happens is it becomes more and more transparent, and you can see the color over lifetime. Again, if you were to look at that, you can look at the color category, color over lifetime. We can open that up, and it looks like there is a gradient, okay, value that we can look at. And here's the gradient value. It's an HDR color, right, that gives us this effect, which is kind of neat. So over lifetime, the alpha transparency goes from 1 to 0, actually, is what's happening here. Okay, very interesting. Color alpha over lifetime, which is neat. And it's a gradient that we're getting in. And then finally, the camera fade alpha. Camera fade alpha is fading it away as it goes further out. Okay, so both those two things are in place. And that really is the particle system from my VFX graph. Let's see if we can do that on our own. All right, so one thing to note is I want to make my own smoke, right? I don't care about fire right now. Fire is a whole other thing. But just to look at it, if we want to see how the fire is made, again, you can make our fire appear somewhere else. Let's just do flames by itself. So we're going to bring flames in. And here's flames. And let's make this like 5 times bigger so we can see it. There's flames. So notice that flames and fire it's kind of the same thing. It has the same kind of twisty pattern, right? Although it looks random all the time. Each system, it looks random, right? Flames is different because when we look at flames, it's different than smoke, because when we look at frames at the bottom, we have quite a few more things happening here at the bottom. One is output particle quad instead of an octagon, right? That's the first thing, okay? It's local, not world, right? So it's not going to move away. It's going to stay within its box, pretty much, whatever the box is going to be. Up in the top, we can see that it uses a flipbook for sure, but the flipbook size, if we look at the texture itself, so here's the flipbook size, open that up, it's different. It's 16 textures by 5 lines. Why is that? Well, the texture itself, if you look at the texture, is a 16 by 5 texture, right? That's what it is. And if you actually look at that, the 16 by 5 texture looks like this. So the flames are actually a sprite sheet, and the sprite sheet is 5 rows of 16 images, right? And what it does is it goes from one row to the next as it animates the fire. So it looks like it's random, but actually what's happening is it's just animating, which is pretty cool. So that's one thing that happens. Now, the thing is, it has a random start. So wherever it starts, it goes to a random spot. So it looks like it's completely random. So every time we look at the flipbook, we get a random location that's from the flipbook that goes from one thing to the other thing. Flipbook is just another name for sprite sheet. Okay. The animation works, and the reason why the animation works is, again, we have a flipbook animation speed. So again, this would be in the texture. And you can see that the speed here is 35 frames per second. That's the speed of the animation flipbook, right? That's what's happening there. And then that is in the update particle where we have a fake flipbook player. So we need a set text index that you require, and we need this flipbook player for us to do the animation part. At the bottom, in this case, we also are going to use the flipbook as an example when it comes to the flipbook size, because this is where the flipbook is itself. We're using a UV mode of flipbook blend. So it blends from one frame to the other frame. That's what it does. The flipbook itself has a kind of orient smart fixed axis over and multiply size over lifetime. So it kind of changes the size over lifetime. You set the scale, pivot, color alpha over lifetime, and multiply alpha. So a bunch of different things happening, similar to what we did earlier in the smoke. So smoke and fire are different in a few different ways, and the main one is this texture. Okay, so that's smoke and fire. Let's see if we can do fire of our own. So again, I'm not going to modify anything. We're just going to make our own. Sorry, not fire. Let's make smoke of our own. Just smoke first. So let's get rid of flames. We don't need that. That was just the example. And let's make our own VFX, right? So inside of our assets, let's make a brand new folder. And we'll call this VFX, right? And inside the VFX, we're going to go to right click. I'm going to go to create. If you wanted to create a shader, then you go up here to shader, and you could make a, shader graph. And you can make a shader based on a URP lit shader graph or something else, okay? That's if you wanted to make a shader. However, I can also go into visual effects, and I can do a visual effects graph. There's also a subgraph, block, or something else. So I want to go to create, again, down to visual effects, and select visual effect graph. So this is going to be our smoke, right? And immediately what I want to do is I want to take this smoke VFX and just put it into the scene so we can see what it looks like, right? And then it looks like this. That's our default particle. And in the game, it kind of looks like this. And one thing that we can see is that we're looking at the smoke from way over here. Let's move our camera closer. So this is inside of our view. Let's move our camera so we're looking at it just like the way I was looking at it right now. I'm just going to twist the camera around you know, the y-axis, just so that, oops, yeah, this way. We're on -90. And just move it over, just touch, there we go, something like that. So this is ours on the right, and let's move it closer so we can see the stuff a little bit clearer. So in the game, it's going to look like this. So notice this is our object in the game. This is the thing that's been created for us, ready? And you can see that these default particles are just there to check things out. All right, so what I want to do is I want to pull this to the side, and I'm going to bring up my smoke by double-clicking on it. It's called smoke, but you can make it whatever you like, right? And let's just bring this whole blackboard in so we can see this on the side as we're moving. I'm just going to use my scene view just to kind of really ramp into the smoke so that I can see just this part and nothing else, so that we can look at this kind of side by side, all right? Whatever I do here, you should be seeing the effect over here pretty much immediately. All right, so one thing I want to do here is categories. Well, I want to add in a texture category. So let's add in a new category. We'll call this category texture. And in the category texture, we're going to add a new texture 2D component. Here's a texture 2D component. We're going to call this the main texture. So main texture. Remember, it's a variable, so you have to kind of be cognizant of that. Main texture. And then inside the main texture, notice the default particle is there. Let's take away the default particle and change that to something else. We'll say that I want smoke. If you actually search for smoke in our project now, we have a couple of additional textures we can use. The simple smoke texture is this one, right? Notice that this is just a 1x1 simple smoke texture. Let's use that one for now. Now you can see even if I've selected it and it says simple smoke here, it's not connected to our Vfx graph in any way. I'm just going to zoom in here on the bottom. One thing to note is that their smoke had two things. One, it was all world space. So this was world space, right? That's one thing that was there. Notice that the smoke disappeared and it went over here. Just putting it out there for you, right? For now, let's leave it at local space just so we can see what we're looking at here. But that's what it does. It goes to the middle of the screen because we haven't told it where to go. Their VFX graph also had, instead of an output particle quad, they had an output octagon, right? So let's get rid of this whole thing. One thing we can do is, with this, we can take this whole piece, the bottom part, we can copy it by Control-C, click somewhere else in the blackboard and paste it. And we can have another copy of this thing so we can look at some of the components that are here, which we probably need over here. And then we can just kind of click on this one and delete it. If we do that, there's nothing that goes here because there's no output. We can use the space bar. If I click anywhere in the blackboard and use the space bar, I can add something new and I can start typing oct, right? And notice it says output particle octagon, and then there's output particle octagon URP. Let's use this one. Okay, so this is the difference between the URP and what we had before. So this is this one, right? And we'll talk about the difference. Look at the difference here: smoothness, metallic, base color, crop factor, and a bunch of other stuff. If I connect it to this, then all of a sudden it's connected, right, like before. My UV mode, notice that the particles are here. My UV mode is going to be Flipbook blend. All right, there's what I wanted to do. And the reason why I can't see my particles now is because they're facing the wrong direction, but that's because of orient face camera plane is not in there. So let's like drag this over here, right? So orient face camera plane is now looking at us, right? Size over lifetime is going to be there. And set color over lifetime is going to be there too. So that's something that we want too. Okay. The default particle is what we're looking at here. And notice the difference between this one and this one. Okay, texture 2D is flipbook layout, and flipbook size, it says 4x4. Here we don't have that. That's the URP version. Okay, what if let's cut this, copy this, move this up here. and put this over here. So this is our, oops, this one, copy it and put it over there. So this is the other option. Again, these ones are inactive. They're just there for us to look at. And let's get rid of this one and put the other one back, like we said. So again, if we can select any kind of context we want. This is the non-URP context. This one looks the same as this one, but when I kind of click onto it, right, we get the same kind of thing happening. I want you to look at the differences here. So I want to copy this one, and I want to paste it in there, and I can copy them and paste them in there too, right? So we can paste in, as opposed to just, kind of when I do drag and drop, I'm copy pasting. You can see now that this is pretty good, right? So I'm probably going to be using the octagon output particle octagon, but not the URP particle octagon, just to kind of give you a sense of that. I want to change the the UV mode, right, to Flipbook blend. Right, that's what I want to use, Flipbook blend. And when I've done that, now we get that same stuff happening. The only difference between the output particle octagon and the output particle octagon lit URP is that it has more inputs right now. Take a look at those inputs, right? So we have smoothness, metallic, base color, crop factor, and a bunch of stuff. I really don't need metallic because I'm not going to make it metallic. Smoothness would be nice if I had a smoothness because it smooths things out. But it'd be nice if this was a solid object compared to a smoke. Smoke would probably be okay like this. All right, so let's get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. And we don't need this anymore. These two things are gone. What I do need is I want to pull out this main texture that we defined here. So it's like drag and drop here into the blackboard. And what you can do with the main texture is, again, if you take this main texture and directly plug it in there, then you're going to get a change in what the particle would look like. Okay. Things to note, right, is direct action like this, where this is a sample smoke, right, texture. A lot of times, notice that when I've directly put it in here, sample smoke, right, that it's gone. The particle, we can't see it anymore. Okay. The Flipbook slice is something else we've removed. We have a Flipbook of 4x4, but we have a simple texture. If I go back to default, right, as an example, we can start seeing that this is the texture that we're using right here. So we're not using a Flipbook at all. If I connect this and I specify Flipbook blend, I got to connect the Flipbook properties as well. So this is the smoke that we have. So pretty straightforward. I mean, really, we didn't do much. But notice that the smoke looks, well, pretty much the exact same, that compared to this. This is more random, and there's some really cool stuff here, but this is like kind of random smoke. Why? Well, because at the top, we have a couple things that are different. One, the spawn rate, right, is 16. Their spawn rate was like 4, right? So that was something that it has. So like 4, kind of piece of smoke, max of with a different max capacity. I could increase this whatever number I want, but I mean, having it stable like this, I want control. And again, anything that I put in here, it'll enable control for me on the right-hand side. So again, if I was to make let's make a new category. The new category will be like our particle. So our some particle properties, let's say. So new category, we'll call this particle properties. Particle properties. We can move the category up over here if we want to. And then under the particle properties, I can click plus, right? And then inside here, think about what this is. This is an integer. So I'm going to grab an integer there. And we're going to call this the rate. So emission rate, which is what this is. Or spawn, actually, it's really spawn rate, not emission rate. And we can specify a number that we want, like if I want to specify 4, we can do that. And then I can drag and drop this into our structure and then just drag this into there. And so what this will do is it will expose the spawn rate on our on our inspector. Let's take a look to see what I mean by that. So I'm going to close this down one sec. And if I go back to our smoke, you can see that on the right, there's nothing there. But if I go to the smoke object that we created, notice down here where it says properties, I have particle properties with a spawn rate. And I can change this right here in the inspector to something that's more decent, like something like 60. You can see now that there's a lot, but the maximum amount, so how much I can do or whatever, is not 60. It's actually less. Okay, so that's something I can do. I can also change the main texture from simple smoke to something else. Let's say, for example, I want to change it to a, kind of, they have other options here for smoke, right? So let's see if I can do that. So let's look for smoke. So there's smoke that is an 8x8, an 8x8 sprite sheet. Notice that it looks like a big sprite sheet, and it looks like octagons. Take a look. That's the shape that I'm emitting, an octagon, as opposed to a quad. It's not a quad, it's an octagon. Octagons work great for smoke because it's kind of a grouping, right? But I want my octagon to be one of these. I don't want my octagon to be the whole sheet. That's what it is. So so I can specify this. If I want to change up my smoke particle, I can do that, or not. All right, let's go back to my smoke. So that's what these things do on the left-hand side. So anything that we put here, again, is exposed here, so we can see it inside the inspector. All right, that's very cool. So I have my capacity. That's the number of particles I have, right? And I can also change the boundary, right? So my boundary right now is a fixed boundary size, so a size of 2 by 3 by 2 with a center at 0, 1, 0. That's where the center is of the object, right? 1 meaning just a little bit above the 0, 0, 0 mark. That would be in the ground, right? We don't want it in the ground. We want it up a little bit. That's why it's where it is. Okay, so that's the bounds. And I can add in another object. Notice that if I scroll down, there is an oriented box. These are all the different things we can add in. So an arc or Boolean, as an example. It also has position and a bunch of other stuff here that we want to add in. But what I want to add in, I can totally handle these separately, the center and the size. But maybe all I care about is I want it to always start at 0, 1, 0 because that makes sense. But I want to modify the size, how big this thing is. I want to make it thinner, or a wisp of smoke as opposed to a smoke that is wider the way it's going, right? So for that, I would need a vector 3. So let's make it a vector 3, and we'll call this vector 3 the smoke, or the size, right? So that's the size. Maybe we'll just call it bounds, right? And bounds would definitely be inside of the particle properties. Let's kind of put that inside of there. You can put that in there. And then we can set them to whatever these defaults are for now. So 2, 3, and 2. And then I can drag and drop the bounds out and then kind of connect it to this. And I want to connect it to the size. There it is. So center, that can't be changed, 0, 1, 0, because I'm not exposing that, but I am exposing the bounds for this. Let's save and compile. Right. One thing to note is I want to change that default texture from simple smoke. Let's say, for example, I wanted to get that other smoke. So let's go to smoke. And let's get that smoke that is, kind of a smoother smoke particle that looks like this. Okay, but I want it to go, this is an 8x8 flipbook. Okay, that's what I want to use, an 8x8 flipbook. How do I do that to make ours different than theirs? Notice that if you look carefully, it's like these octagons are appearing right here, but they're full of all these little smoke particles. It looks weird, it doesn't look right. Okay, so in order for me to use that, I need a couple of things to enable. I need a flipbook, right, which is my what's missing here, right, in my particle update. Okay, I need one of those. And if I kind of put in text, example, an add text index. I want to put an add text index here. An add text index is the thing that I need to kind of create my particle bounds with, or sorry, my flipbook. Also in UV mode, right now we're in default, right? Default UV mode. We want to move from default to flipbook blend. All right, and if I move to flipbook blend, now you can start seeing the flipbook coming up. Look, you see that it's coming up in these different things. It's not 4x4. That's not what the flipbook is, right? It's 6x6 or 8x8 is what we've chosen, right? So let's make that 8x8. And you know what? If I want to modify the flipbook size, then what do I want to do? I want to create an object for that, right? So let's do that. So 8x8 is X and Y. That is so that's particle, that's texture. So this is kind of the texture itself that I'm modifying. So let's add it to the flipbook in there. So I can say that that is a vector 2. And the vector 2, I'm going to put inside this category. We're going to call this vector 2 the flipbook size. I'm going to drag and drop, or I'm going to put the values in here. So it's going to be 8x8. That's the size of my flipbook. And drag it in there and convert that to this. So that's direct conversion, right? And you can see now that I'm getting a particle, only one particle, not every particle from the flipbook, but it's really not animating. And the reason why it's not animating is because I haven't really done that, okay? So you can see how this works. I also want to make this darker, and because these are really light and transparent, I don't want to do that. So let's see if we can make something a little bit darker than what this is. So save this, and let's take a look at the other one. Now, there's only one thing. You cannot look at more than one of these at the same time, okay? Whenever we use a VFX graph, you can only use one. So if I was to go back, if I shut this down, and if I opened up my smoke VFX graph that was given to us, just to give an example, so if I go back to VFX smoke, and if I look at theirs compared to ours, right, then you can see what things are missing. So force, linear drag, I've added a index. Maybe I added the index in the wrong spot. But I think what we need to do here is add in a flipbook player so we can actually play the animations from one to the next. We're also going to use the frame rate that we're going to use in here. Remember, the frame rate is like some amount of frame rate that we're going to use. So that's one thing we're missing. We're missing a flipbook player, right? If we wanted to use force and drag to make it look like theirs, we could. What else are we missing? So we've got the soft particle fade distance. That's in the soft particle. If we click that on, they also have a size over lifetime, color over lifetime, and camera fade min-max distance. We haven't done this one either. Okay, so that's something that they've got. They've also got this set text index, but they put it, instead of the update, they put it way up here in initialize particle, and I think we have to move ours up there too, else it won't work properly. Okay, so when we initialize particle, we're going to set the text index to whatever we're going to look at, and it's going to be a random index. So if I wanted to do that, one great thing about this is, remember, we can just copy paste. So what if do you think I can copy paste all of this part, and set text index? I'll just connect all this to the set text index. Let's see if I can do that. So copy. And then if I close this down, can I do that? Is it possible? Probably not, but let's try. So I'm going to go back to my VFX, double click on smoke. And so what we learned was that set text index should be part of initialized particles. Let's move this part up here. And then what we want to do is we want to see if we can paste that stuff, and sure enough we can. Save time. Where I want to put the connection there, right? And one thing also is the flipbook size is here. We have a flipbook size, but flipbook size and this flipbook size are totally different. So we want to kind of use the same one. Multiply float. Remember, we can multiply by X and Y. right? Take those X and Y flipbook size and convert it, right? Random number from 0 to whatever, that's okay. And use flipbook is actually a Boolean, all right? So they actually put them up here. Flipbook size and flipbook size the same. This flipbook size is 1 by 1. We don't want to use this one. We want to use ours. So let's get rid of this one. This one. Oop, undo. We want to get rid of just this one. Goodbye. We want to bring our flipbook size in there, right? And we want to connect our X and Y to the A and B, just like they had it. Nice. So now our 8 by 8 is what's happening there, okay? And so that's one thing that we have in here. So flipbook size is gone. We don't need this one anymore. Goodbye. Use flipbook is a Boolean, and this is something that is something we can kind of turn on and off. I'd like to use this one, so I'm going to bring this into our texture area. So this is our category. Use flipbook. Okay, and then that kind of links in with this one. So that we can kind of, and this is a great thing, is the learning here is we can take stuff from an existing VFX graph and port it into ours. No problem. So let's save. So we did the set index, and we put it in the wrong spot. This is set lifetime random. We put it in the wrong spot. Let's disconnect this. We can just disconnect it by doing kind of copying or moving it around. And particle update was kind of hanging here. This one should be here, and that should be something that we can see now. There we go. So that is random particles that we're going to get from the flipbook. That's what's happening there. Nice. Excellent. So we have flipbook size there, and so on. And we have a crop factor, and we have use alpha clipping, and the blend mode is alpha. The flipbook layout is a texture 2D, right? And we can say if I want to use soft particles, I can turn that on. And we can turn the soft particle distance to whatever it's going to be. We can make that an object. So soft particle distance seems to be a integer. So let's put that in there as part of the thing as well. So we're going to add another integer. We'll call this soft particle fade distance. Fade distance. All right, there it is. And I'm just going to grab this one and just drag it into here. And then we're going to say that the fade distance right now, we're going to give it a value of 1. And we're going to pull this one in here. And we're going to connect it up so we have access to that as well. Okay. So again, we're getting there with our little particle. Okay. We're still missing some stuff. And let's go back to the other one and see what we're missing, because I can't remember. Maybe you can. So again, one more time, and then we'll stop. And I'll talk about what I want you guys to do. So this is an example of how it works, but I want you to make your own and talk about that. So again, stuff that's missing is all of this. So let's suppose I want to steal all of this part, the global force, drag. I don't really care about anything except for this one. So these ones here, I want those ones. So flipbook frame rate, flipbook player, I want to be able to use those. And I want to grab these ones, copy them, and I want to put that into the update particle. The rest, I'm not going to use flipbook size. Actually, maybe I'll come and do that too. Let's go back into our own. Again, I want to borrow some stuff that they have, and I want to kind of click in there and press paste, and let's see what it does. So I pasted this part successfully, but I didn't paste the middle part, right, successfully. That's the flipbook player, which was what I'm missing. So let's expand this. I'll move this down. and I'll move this down, and then I'll go Flipbook player, and then I'll connect that to this. And then what we want is how many frames, the frame rate. And right now, use Flipbook is already there. We'll use ours, so we don't have to use that one. We'll use this one. And the predicate is a branch. So basically it says, if I'm using a Flipbook, then I can turn it on and off if it's on. And by default, the frame rate is something else we can kind of pull in. So frame rate we definitely want, and I want to pull that into our underneath Flipbook size. So let's do that. So how many frames per second this is going to. Let's go put it there for now, and let's just drag it kind of in there. Again, we can decide how fast we want things to change, right? And we'll leave it at 25 for now. So use Flipbook, the value is off actually. If we turn it on by default, then what's going to happen is you're going to see the smoke is going to animate. It's going to change from one thing to the other thing. Notice it's moving because the smoke is it's not the same as the other smoke, right? The other smoke was just like not using a Flipbook at all. Could it be with a PBR shader graph? I've always used it in our game project for 2 effects that we choose to do. Yes, you can. I just want you to demonstrate that you know how to do this. That's all I want you to do, Liam. The other thing is size over lifetime. So size over life, size by speed, random, right? And also color over lifetime, and then that whole camera fade alpha thing, right? So let's kind of go here and press space, and we say fade, camera fade. And camera fade has 2 parts, a fade distance, right? And a visible distance and a faded distance, right? So this is pretty good. I wouldn't mind changing the color object, the color of the actual particle itself. And because I think the color is pretty dark, it'd be nice if we had a color to put in here as well. So we can tint the texture to whatever the texture looks like. So this is the initial particle that we're going to use, right? So this is kind of where this is the size of the particle player, and then down in here we have some additional features where we have our texture and so on. So I want to add a color. So how does that work? So save, and let's leave this part, and we can add more of these. I just want to make the size bigger. Each of the particle sizes I want to make bigger, right? It's not bad, but I'd like to make it a little bit bigger than this, and then also change the color, make it darker. So we can do this in color over lifetime, but let's see how they did it. So if I go to smoke again, let's see what they did. So we have velocity, position, and we need to do the position because the position itself, the initial position, is at 0, 0, 0, right? Because it's a world space, not local space. Velocity, lifetime, the text index, the angle, right? Those are things that we can modify too, but we're not going to modify any of this stuff. So none of this talks about color. Global force, drag, and branch, that's all okay. I'm okay with that stuff, right? And this uses a Flipbook, and this does too. Down in here, we can branch to say, do we use a Flipbook for the Flipbook size? And here's the main texture, right? And then down in here is size over lifetime, and this one is color over lifetime. And color over lifetime is color alpha over lifetime, where we have color and alpha multiply. So what is this color over lifetime? And if you look at the color over lifetime, right now it looks pretty dark, right? And I want to grab this one for sure, and I want to use this color over lifetime in ours, right? And I also want to grab these two. So let's grab these 2 things because we want to have those 2 things work. So grab those 2 things, comma, or copy, go back into ours, and this is the last thing we'll do, and then we'll come back into what I need you to do. So let's post those in there. And so color over lifetime and camera fade distance. Remember what they did? They did this and this. So they kind of go into both. And color fade distance, min-max distance is pretty cool. So that is definitely part of the main texture. So I'll kind of put that at the bottom. And color over lifetime, that part is this part. Now, color mode, it says color alpha, right? Color and alpha, just alpha, right? And this component was different, as an example, than what we had before, right? So color over lifetime is the texture. There it is. And this is neat. But the component that they had was not set color over life, but something else. So let's save that. One more thing, sorry. So make sure we're good. Save that and go back to theirs, because I like what they had. And I did it this way because I wanted to go through it with you so you understand the different piece parts. If you already know how to do this, fantastic. They had a different thing, color alpha over life, right? So let's copy this component here and go back into ours. And in ours, let's remove this piece and let's put in the new piece. Put that up and put this across. And that's a little better. Again, it's not as aggressive as this one. It's not moving like that one, but it's a bit of smoke that comes out. Now, we can vary a bunch of stuff in here. If we're using a Flipbook or not, which is the sprite sheet. Ours doesn't look so bad. We've taken some things from the other one for sure, but that's something that we can use. How long it lasts is an important thing. We can continue to add things like random velocity if we want to, and additional spawn rate. If our spawn rate is too low, let's say, for example, our capacity is a lot bigger. Let's say it's 100, the capacity. And what I can do is I can increase the spawn rate to something like, 30. And this is a lot different. It'll look a lot different than theirs. Now, it may not look as nice. We can also vary it so it kind of streams kind of upwards by changing the bounds. So I can say, well, the bounds for theirs is pretty big, but I want my bounds to be small. Let's make my XZ plane only 1. So we can say that it's kind of in a very much thinner, kind of position, right, that it's going in. And then you can see that the Y is 3. So that's the size of my object, right? So you can see what this is doing. Okay. Okay, so that's our example, and you can see that there's smoke. It's very subtle, like that it's smoking, and so on. You can make this way, much different by changing a lot of these options, right? So, for example, color of a lifetime. You can see that there's a lot of colors that are either darker or brighter. You can change this if you want to change the color so it's darker. You can make the color way darker starting off. You can make it more redder, right, or whatever. By changing some of these things, you can make so that the smoke is your own kind of smoke. Okay, so kind of a dark or a black. If you want to go straight black, you can do that too. Part of the gradient, right? All right, and there you go. So save. So, okay, that's great. So now that we've done this is great, but how about, does it even work on mobile or not? Okay. First of all, let's go back to our thing. So we installed VFX, we did that. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to create 2 custom effects and add them to our project, whatever custom effect you want, right? There are some great tutorials all right, that you can use. And I'm saying you can use any tutorial as a base, and you can also combine it with a shader graph component. Okay, this is the thing that you can do. Things that I recommend. Who do I recommend that you look at from a graph perspective? Well, this guy here, I think, has some amazing tutorials. This guy here has some amazing tutorials that I recommend for you. So let's take a look at this guy. So this guy right here, right? And so I recommend you subscribe. I'm just going to put this inside of your chat. Great. I think this is an amazing little channel if you haven't seen it already. And they have some amazing things on, not just on things like magic orbs. And it goes through the entire VFX graph, how they work and so on. They're very short videos too. They're not very long. It's like 15 minutes, 17 minutes, you know, that kind of thing. This is 17 minutes where you create a really cool sword effect or whatever. They have flamethrowers and black holes and warp drives and a bunch of other ones that he includes. And he continues to add more and more all the time. Take a look at them. I think they're really great. Again, any two effects that you choose from anything that you've done here would be awesome if you could include it inside of our game as an example. So really kind of cool cracks or anything like that. So why is this really good? These cracks, especially if they're procedural. A good example would be if you want to break something, you want to create something like that of a destructible environment where it's kind of using a graph to do that, which is pretty cool. So that's great. And this is definitely one of them. You can also use a bunch of other ones. There's tons of other ones out there that are very similar. So again, it's totally up to you which two you want to use, but you can use any two effects of your own. Okay, so two effects might be fire and smoke, right? If you really wanted to do that. But I want to see your own fire and smoke, not the ones that are built into, you know, the examples. If you're just taking the examples that I just gave you, which are, you know, inside of our inside of like that we've downloaded and installed through VFX Graph, that really doesn't suffice. Make it something interesting, you know, as an example. Make it so that you learn something. That's the idea here, more than anything else. Okay, so that's VFX Graph and what I'm expecting from you. All right, let's get into this now, and let's get back into our. We'll leave this, you know, kind of entertainment, you know, here in our experiments. Let's get back into our scene, our main scene. And what I want to do with the main scene is I want to bring in our bonfire right in here, right? And I want to talk about it next to the player. So here's our player. We can think about the bonfire as just like in Dark Souls, where we see the bonfire. Well, that's our place to rest, right? Kind of thing, right? So here's the bonfire. We'll put it like right here next to the coin, right? As an example, we can, you know, realistically, we probably could get rid of this coin right here. So let's go to that coin, this one, and let's just get rid of this one, right? And inside of our you know, kind of our project, we'll add a new folder. Again, this is a prop more than anything else, like bonfire. So let's grab the bonfire prefab that they've given us. Here's our bonfire prefab, and let's just drag and drop it into the scene in front of us. There it is. Bonfire, right? And let's make it like twice the size so we can really see it, guys. Okay. And yeah. And what I want to do with this one, why did I put this bonfire in here, right? Well, a couple things, right? If this is our starting tile or whatever, that's neat, right? Eventually what I want to do is I want to procedurally generate this little tile map that we have right here. Instead of it being, so that's interesting, that's not animating, eh? Why is that not animating? Oh, this one. Huh, look at that. Those ones aren't animating. Let's go back down here to the smoke and fire. So yeah, so those are the coin. Let's see if I can grab that coin prefab. Maybe is that not connected to an animator? What happened? Here's the coin animator. There's a rotate function. And let's just grab the coin body and drag it in there. And then, yeah, it works. Okay. So why? Oh, because it's not running. Well, that's the one thing. But anyways, sorry, curious. So yeah, so it's fine. It's great. So, I get fooled because I'm seeing this running and the other things running. So what I want to do now is can we put this and up on a simulator at all, right? That's something to note. Can we put this on a simulator? Does it work? How does it work? Does it work at all? Yes or no? What happens? Well, things we found earlier today is that it does not. Okay, and we'll talk about this because then what's the point if you can't make this work, right? And there's a couple of things to note that are things that are coming down the pipe. One thing is they're working on something with mobile. Mobile's getting better and better. It will work with mobile. So VFX Graph will work with mobile if you have a compute shader. So one thing you could do is you can do platform detection again, and you can sit there and say, okay, cool. If I've got VFX Graph, if it's supported because I have a compute shader, then if I have compute shader support, then play the VFX Graph object. If I don't, use the CPU, right? So you can make it better or worse depending on the type of object you want to download, right? So if you might have that as an option for phones that support that kind of thing. For example, the latest iPhone would support compute shaders, and maybe some of the latest Android devices will also do them. But if you try and put this VFX graph on your LD player, it won't work. So what I've asked you to do is for you to put it in Windows build instead. So let's make a Windows build quickly, and then we'll stop for the day. So let's try that. So I'm going to say File, Build Settings. And right now it's set up for Android. Let's make it for Windows. And it's been a while since we've done this. Let's switch platforms. It's going to take some time. Mine kind of crashed out this morning. It just took all kinds of time to do this translation, right? It didn't happen right away. So if it takes a long time for you, it's because URP and shader graph and VFX graph, there's a lot of little files and components that are part of this thing, and it's very interesting, but it has a lot to do. You have a lot to do with this thing. So this is exactly what happened last time. It took a long time for it to switch over to Windows. In fact, it crashed at this point for me, and it might just do the same now. Ooh, oh, I can't believe it. And this is another part. I tried it again, and it crashed here, where it was doing the waiting for Unity's code in Unity Editor Core Module.dll. Again, it took forever. I had to restart. Our project altogether. So I'll give it a second to see if that works. All right. So again, are you guys clear about what I want? I'm going to put the lab report on. So the two effects, you're going to be judged on how aesthetic they look. Are they nice? Do they blend together? If you're going to use them together, they got to blend together. They got to look nice together. Or you can have two separate, effects that you kind of have. For example, if you made lightning and you made fire, there would have to be a reason why you have lightning and fire. Lightning would have to go first, and then fire would trigger. That's a good blending, okay, as an example. But if you're just going to do lightning and fire all together at the same time and just make it kind of go crazy, it might not look very good, right? So try and make it so that it's reasonable, so that they blend nicely together. And there's some great tutorials out there that go through how to make this stuff work. All right, so please make sure they blend if they're together. If they're apart, then each one has to work nicely. So if I make sure that you have a prefab as an example that you can drag and drop into your scene, so it works nicely. So you can see this is going to crap out. I'm just going to cancel Unity here. So Control Shift Escape. I'm just going to go into, and it's really bizarre that it does this. I think it's a bug. Probably because I converted to URP. Going to relaunch. And you're going to see because I switched to Windows, it's going to switch over. The idea here is that you can have fun with this. That's what this is about. This isn't about being oppressive, right? Again, what I'm looking for is you to explore stuff and to come up with some really cool little effects that you can add to your game. All right. So yes, so file build settings, it should be converted. It is. I want to go to player settings for now, and let's change a couple things. One, it should say lab 6, not lab 5. Um, Same thing with Android. If we were in Android in other settings, it should have said, I think we already changed to lab 6, but up here it should say lab 6 for sure. The other thing is that on the Windows side, for resolution and presentation, please don't make it full screen. If you're going to show it on the window, make it windowed. Um, and so that way you can escape. You can get out of there. The other thing that we notice is that there's no way to remove, once we're in Windows, there's no way to release your mouse. Even if you press the escape key, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't unlock the cursor in Windows mode. It only does it in the editor, right? So you need to provide a key to do that, where you can unlock the cursor. So cursor lock can be off when you, click the escape key. Or if you want to just close down your windows, there's got to be a way of doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this off now. And before I build for Windows, I'm going to put a little script together inside of the game controller. So let's make a new script. And we'll make a short little script just to let us get out of there. We'll call this the game controller script. And in the game controller, I'm going to drag and drop game controller on there. So game controller. And the only thing game controller is going to do is give me one little function that's going to allow me to escape from the window. So let's see that. Okay. So again, we don't need any of this. Well, actually, I do need the update. I don't need this part. And what I'm going to say is input if input.get key down, and we'll use keycode keycode dot the back quote. I'll use the back quote to do this, not the escape key, because escape key might be by accident, where you're thinking you can stop things from happening. One day when Visual Studio's ReSharper extension triggers, then what I want is application.quit. Okay, so application quit kind of kicks us out of here. If you wanted to do that, this only works when the application is running. It will not work in the editor. So if you press the backtick button or the backquote button inside of the editor, this will not quit the editor. Okay, just letting you know. Because the application is not really running. It's just being previewed in the editor. That's how we look at it. Okay. What about if I wanted to change in the camera controller? Notice that the lock state is here. And what I want to do is I wanted to turn the lock state on if we're not in Android. But if we want to, we can turn the lock state off, right? Again, it's in the camera that we turn it on for the first place, but we can certainly control it in the game controller, right? So we can say that if input.get key down, let's just copy paste just to make it quick. And we'll use the escape key, right? We can say that the cursor lock state, right, is equal to cursor mode none. Okay, so that will unlock you, because otherwise there won't be an unlock mechanism there. So both ways, if you want to just break out of your code, application quit, or the other one would be this, and this is only for Windows, right? If you're in LD player, then of course none of this would work. Okay, so let's try this out and let's see what happens. So again, I want to go to File, Build Settings, and I want to do Build and Run. And I want to target builds, and I'm going to make a new folder called Windows. And inside my Windows build, I'm just going to click Select Folder and let it do its thing, save the scene, and let it go. Okay, questions while we're waiting for this to be built. Are you clear on what you have to do? I think there's some really great things you can do here. Lots of fun to be had, and so on. And you know what? I think it's great to follow some tutorials to get the see how this thing works. It's the window. I can see there's the coin, and where's my effect? Where'd it go? How come it's not playing? In fact, it's missing. And it's missing because when I crashed, the effect wasn't saved. I know, I'm so sorry. All right. So one thing is if I press the if I'm clicking here, right, and if I press escape, we're good, right? And let's go back and fix that problem. So again, there's no effect. So let's go back into the external assets, samples, and visual effect graph, and grab those. I want to grab the bonfire asset. And I want to bring that bonfire asset into the scene where the player is. And I want to get rid of the coin. This didn't happen last time because I didn't save the scene. Let's try that. And then I crashed, right? Remember that? It's my bonfire. And let's make it 2 times as big. And there it is, save. And then let's redo it. So file, build, and run. And let's see what Liam's got. Liam's got this. Cool. That's excellent. I like it, Liam. And that is that in oh, that's in the editor. Let's see that you're in the editor here. It's pretty neat. I like this part. It's neat. Whoa. No. No. What the heck? Wow, that was weird. Couldn't escape from that. All right, there we are. So this is what it would look like, right? So we're in here. We see our effect. You can see that it's billboarded. So we can see this is the effect that's inside of Windows. But notice that I can't escape. But if I press the escape key, now I'm out. I click back into there. I can never get back in because clicking onto it doesn't do anything. It doesn't get me back into the window anymore. And if I press the backtick character, I've kind of escaped. All right, any questions around this? That's the build. That's where I want you to show me the build inside of a Windows player, right? So I can see it. So there's no conflict when it comes to showing me the effect that you're going to have. I'm just using the built-in effect that we got, but you can show me your effect somewhere in the code. Okay, and again, it should be live, and it's something that you're going to record with YouTube. Hey, why isn't this? That's not animating anymore. Oh yeah, because we're not running still. I keep on thinking that we're live because I'm seeing the smoke running live, and of course we're not. There it is. Bump, bump. Right. All right, that's it for me today, guys. Any questions before we go for the day? Just a couple of notes, again, before we run away. So I just wanted to give us our timeline here. We're sitting at week 10. And next week, we're doing organic modeling when we get together. We're going to do more shader graph in week 12. That's when it's coming. I think there's going to be some great stuff to do there. Particle effects, you can definitely use. We've already talked about particle effects last semester, but you can definitely use particle effects instead of VFX Graph because of the compatibility, right? But shader graph is great. There's a lot of stuff we can do with it, and it really binds nicely with the weather system. If you want to make the clouds roll fast across the sky, if you want to do any of those kind of things. We've already installed the URP up here, so we're pretty good in here. Questions before we go for the day? All right, guys. Otherwise, that's it. I'm going to stop recording up online, and then we'll hopefully we'll see you guys next week. I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you.